Троцкисты и бухаринцы, товарищи судьи, этот право-троцкистский так называемый блок, верхушка которого фигурирует сейчас здесь на скамье подсудимых, это не политическая партия, это не политическое течение, это банда уголовных преступников. И не просто уголовных преступников, а преступников, продавшихся вражеским разведкам, преступников, которые даже уголовники третируют как самых падших, самых последних, самых презренных, самых растленных из растленных.
During the three made-up Moscow trials in August 1936, January 1937 and March 1938, the highest figures of the old Leninist guard suffer torture and publicly confess so-called crimes of treason, sabotage and terrorism. Stalin executes his old companions Zinoviev, Kamenev and Bukharin without batting an eye. 10 years before, he was hugging them.
Товарищ, троцкисты-зиновьевцы, которые являются прямыми врагами рабочего класса трудящихся, докатились до того, что они объединились с фашистами, объединились со всей нечистью, которая злобствует против первого советского государства, где господствует труд, где господствует рабочий класс вместе со всем трудовым народом нашего Советского Союза.
A major campaign is launched in the whole country to stigmatize the accused. The goal is to lead people to accept that the revolutionary heroes of yesterday have become the traitors and spies.
Я думаю, товарищи, что выражу мнение всех здесь присутствующих и мнение всего пролетариата нашей страны, если скажу, что нужно этих гадов расстрелять.
Никакой пощады врагам! Расстрелять всех до одного, как бешеных собак! Смерть изменникам Родины!
Public meetings in factories and kolkhozes position the fallen leaders as scapegoats, responsible for the difficulties encountered while building socialism.
И предать суду всю подлую банду убийц, провокаторов, негодяев.
The Moscow trials reflect the Great Terror. They attract attention from all over the world while hiding the purge happening in the prisons and inside the NKVD's office. The execution of the old Bolsheviks masks the sheer size of the repression that strikes the everyday man. Indeed, within a couple of months, 120,000 communist officials are arrested and convicted. Half of them receive the death penalty. Alexander Prokhorov was an engineer and a member of the Communist Party. He was arrested in 1937.
Three people came around midnight. One stood by the door while the others started their search. They woke up my son. They were looking for counter-revolutionary texts, but they didn't find any. Yet I ended up in the Lubyanka.
The Lubyanka in Moscow is the headquarters of the NKVD. It's a prison where people are tortured and shot. Olga Amodova-Sliosberg was a communist activist too, and she was arrested at home.
We were arrested on the basis of having joined the plot to kill Kaganovich. I'd never even seen Kaganovich. My 6-year-old son was sitting in his bedroom. I came in and I said, "Do not cry, darling. I'm going on a mission." And he answers, "Dad is on a mission, now you too. If the nanny also goes on a mission, who shall we stay with?"
On Stalin's direct order, family members of the fallen communist leaders are tracked down and arrested, especially their wives. On this document, Stalin added with a blue pen that the families of the traitors should be systematically sentenced to 8 years in labor camps instead of 5, as it was initially planned. And while members of the party are purged, the same thing happens to thousands of NKVD leaders, such as Mikhail Polyachek's father.
He came home. He dropped his suitcase and hugged me. And then NKVD's agents knocked on the door. We didn't know what was going on. Later on, we were told that he'd been sentenced to 10 years without mail rights.
Without mail right means execution.
Mom died in 1938, in a way. Everything inside her disappeared. The shock was so strong. She was still a young woman. She was 38. But she died inside.
The Gulag's camp leaders also faced the purge. Among many others, there's Eduard Berdzin, the man with the Rolls-Royce, who had led the camp in the Kolyma. He is shot in the basement of the Lubyanka. Or Alexander Nogtev, first commander of the Solovki camp, who is arrested and deported in 1938 to the Gulag. Then comes the turn of the army. Marshal Tukhachevsky, a man who kept warning about the danger Hitler represented, is accused of being a spy working for the Gestapo. He is executed in June 1937. Along with him, 40,000 high-ranking officials, including most of the generals, are eliminated. The Red Army has lost its head. The goal of the purge of political, economic, military and police-related elites is to replace leaders of the Leninist revolution period by a younger generation, more obedient and that can more easily be manipulated politically and ideologically. A generation shaped by the Stalin spirit, and thus a new collection of leaders arises, whose amazing careers are owed to Stalin the guide, a person they will be completely devoted to. The revolution is eating up those who created it. The purge of the communist officials is impressive, yet mass executions reach much further than the communists. They are but 1/10 of the victims. In 1936, Yagoda, head of the NKVD since 1934 and responsible for the Gulag's expansion, is arrested. He is shot in 1938 as a right-wing Trotskyist.
Партия поставила во главе НКВД верного своего сына, друга и соратника товарища Сталина Николая Ивановича Ежова.
Yezhov received the nickname of bloodthirsty midget. He's barely more than 1.5 meters high, and as head of the NKVD, he'll carry out the greatest state massacre to ever take place in Europe during peacetime. Within 16 months, from August 1937 to November 1938, around 750,000 Soviet citizens are killed after being sentenced to death by a special court following a series of sham trials. That's almost 50,000 executions per month, 1,600 per day. During the Great Terror, one adult Soviet out of 100 is killed in secret with a bullet in the neck. One example among hundreds of thousands of others, Gavril Bogdanov. This former kulak, who escaped exile in Siberia, is arrested on August 8, 1937. Photographed on the 12th, accused with encouraging counter-revolutionary actions, interrogated on the 15th of August, sentenced to death on the 19th, and shot on the 20th, as can be seen on the execution order. The starting point of this murderous mass purge is a note written by Stalin on the 2nd of July, 1937. The Red Dictator asks that the most hostile criminals be immediately arrested and shot. In order to carry out the order, Nikolai Yezhov publishes on the 30th of July 1937 the NKVD Operational Order Number 00447, sent to all regional NKVD leaders. This incredible document, the cause behind the death of hundreds of thousands of people, stipulates that home security agencies have the mission to eradicate in the most ferocious manner all anti-Soviet elements, and to end once and for all the threat represented by those who undermine the very foundations of the Soviet state. Suspects are divided into two categories. The first one means execution. The second means the Gulag for 10 years. Order 00447 then goes on to list quotas of people to arrest per region. In the first column are the executions to perform. In the second, people to send to the Gulag. The operation starts in August 1937 and is supposed to last 4 months. It'll last 15 instead. Yezhov clearly sets the tone on the eve of the first day of the Great Terror. If we end up shooting 1,000 people more than expected during this operation, this is fine. The operations are secret, planned and centralized, and decided at the highest level within the party by Stalin and Yezhov, along with Stalin's closest allies, Molotov, Kaganovich, Voroshilov, Mikoyan. The purpose of these secret mass operations is to remove for good any threat in order to purify the Soviet society. Terror becomes part of everyday life. Soviet citizens are paralyzed and live in the fear of being arrested. At 3 a.m. they arrived and knocked on our door. He opened. There were 3 NKVD officials. They come in and ask, "Who's living here with you?" He answers, "My wife and my 2 children." "Line up against the wall, all 4 of you." Then they continued to search the house, but they didn't find anything, yet they took Dad away. We went to the prison. There were a lot of people there making written complaints. We did the same with Mum. Someone told us, these are political prisoners. They've been sent to Siberia last night in a freight train. He's no longer here. You won't hear from him for the next 20 years. You won't have access to mail. One of the characteristics of this massive purge is secrecy. Secrecy of the judgment, usually done behind closed doors. Secrecy of the execution that takes place in unknown locations. Families of those sentenced to death are never informed.
They just kept tormenting them there. When my father ended up there, and they started to interrogate him, he refused to sign the deposition. He was a lightweight boxer, and he could lift a man by the throat and hold him against a wall. He didn't sign. He threw them all out of the office. Where were they brought? He closed the back of the truck, and that's it. It wasn't a closed vehicle, but a truck to carry merchandise. That's the last time I saw my father. How can you forget? It haunts you forever.
I was there when they arrested my mother. It happened at midnight. I was already in my bed. NKVD agents came into my bedroom, and I could hear the sounds of their boots. My mother kissed me before leaving, but I remained silent, huddled up and afraid. My fear was both mental and physical, and I didn't move. When my mother left, I couldn't even see clearly because of my tears. I don't know in what circumstances they arrested my father, but I never saw my parents again. The Great Terror leads to an unprecedented influx of prisoners in the camps. Within 2 years, almost 1.5 million people, the ones from Category 2 who escaped execution by Yezhov's minions, are sent to the Gulag. In January 1939, there's almost 2 million prisoners, including 43% of political prisoners who were sentenced based on Article 58 of the Penal Code for counter-revolutionary crimes. Such a percentage will never be reached again during Stalin's time. The Great Terror ends suddenly on November the 17th, 1938, following a decision by Stalin. Executions are stopped, and Yezhov is held responsible. He resigns from all his functions. In 1940, the bloodthirsty midget turned alcoholic is executed. "Tell Stalin that I'll die with his name on my lips," are his last words before being shot.